Ask almost anyone, the world over, what is most important to them in life, and I can pretty much guarantee you that one of the top 3 responses will be my family. Family is fundamental to who we are. That mixed up bunch of sometimes dysfunctional human beings shapes who we are as a person and is a strong influence on where our future is headed. Funny how we take them for granted so often.
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
Well, it's absolutely fantastic to be on the Zoom with Bjorn Karlman, currently from the Philippines, living in the Philippines. How are you, Bjorn?
Hey, Kent. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Thanks. Really great to talk to you as well. This is our first podcast together.
Yes, absolutely. But you've actually been a regular writer for Signs of the Times magazine for quite a while. One of our regulars, which is great. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been enjoying it. And obviously, podcast is a different format, but especially these days, it makes a lot of sense to everyone's doing stuff on Zoom, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, they say the share price for Zoom is doing very, very well lately.
I know. I wish I had some shares in Zoom.
Fair enough. So, Bjorn, you've written an article for us in this month's Signs of the Times magazine, the May edition. It's called The Love of Family. And I think we get a really clear picture from not just this article, but other articles that you've written that family is really important to you. You call yourself a digital nomad. You're sort of moving around from one country to another with your wife, Jammie, and your daughter, who's preschool age.
Yeah, she's kind of at that point. We haven't formally put her in school yet, little Journey. Mm-hmm. But it will happen soon now.
Yeah, sure. So tell us about how does family work when you are traveling like that, when you are changing countries, every couple of years? It must be a challenge, but it must be special in some ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great question. I get asked that several times a year, I feel. And it's actually a little bit more dramatic than that, this digital nomad thing. So basically what that means is you're working remotely, kind of like everyone is now, but from around the world. And digital nomads are known for just, basically being nomadic, traveling around. We do 2 or 3 countries a year. Yeah. So right now we're in the Philippines. We weren't intending to be in the Philippines this long, but we basically got caught by the coronavirus and the lockdowns and the travel restrictions. So we're here.
When you're thinking of, your health, this is a health crisis we're facing right now. And suddenly it becomes really important as to, what the quality of the health system is like, where you are. I mean, in Australia, we've got off pretty easy. I think we've had just less than 100 people die so far. Yeah, what about the Philippines? How's the health system coping there? Is there any sense that it's struggling to keep up, or the intensive care is overwhelmed, or has it not got to that stage, or unlikely to get to that stage?
The official numbers still have the deaths at well under 1,000, the last I saw. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's obviously higher than Australia, but a lot lower than many countries. Yeah. And so that's encouraging. I say official because people do definitely wonder about the numbers that are put out there, whether, how accurate they are. And not just because, nursing homes are catching up with their reporting or whatever. We definitely think there could be underreporting by hospitals and agencies and this and that. I've been following the news. I don't see this overcapacity issue that you have, say, in the UK right now and parts of the US, huge worries about ventilators. I think that's part of the reason that they've been so strict in the Philippines, because they know that the health system basically would not be able to keep up with those kinds of, with like a tsunami of, admissions to do with COVID-19. So that, to me, partly explains why they are so strict, because they basically have to be, in some ways.
Yeah. Now, this leads us, I guess, to your article, Bjorn, because you talk about how a few years back now you were living in Thailand, right. another Southeast Asian country there. Your wife, Jammie, was pregnant, which is obviously very exciting for you guys, first baby on the way. But early in the pregnancy, some complications developed. So there you are in Thailand. I mean, is the health system in Thailand, similarly the sort of place where, you wouldn't go to hospital if you didn't absolutely have to? And what happened there when you did have to go to hospital?
In a similar way, you do basically avoid hospital if you can. Thailand's actually more of a, more than the Philippines, is sort of advertised as a medical tourism country.
Right.
So actually they do have really solid facilities, and the Philippines does too, but more so Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you do there basically is that you basically end up paying quite a bit if you want really, sort of developed world care. So it gets pretty pricey, and we were having a baby, so we were like, you know what, we're gonna have to do what we're gonna do here, and basically get the best care possible. Our issue was that we were first time parents or parents to be, or hoping to be,
mm-hmm.
and we had a really, really difficult pregnancy. Within weeks, we thought we were going to lose the baby.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrifying. It was really scary. And our first emergency, I wrote about actually in the article, we ended up in just the hospital next door because we were panicked. We didn't really know what to do. We weren't researched enough. So we just rushed over. We actually walked over to the hospital close by. And that was not one of those wonderful hospitals where, that attract a lot of medical tourism. It was just like the local hospital.
Yeah.
And horrible sort of reception there. I mean, by our physician. I remember I was feeling really desperate after the first sort of ultrasound, and I asked him, what are the chances of my baby making it, of us actually having successful pregnancy? And he just told me so like a robot. He was like 50-50. And then he tried to offload us to whatever other hospital that would take us, basically. So that was a punch in the gut. And anyone that's gone through that knows what that feels like, to receive bad news. And on top of that, to have, for it to be like really bedside manner, it was really rough. I don't think that describes Southeast Asian care, that experience.
Mm-hmm.
We later got a really great doctor, but that was really, really hard and super scary, and just left us with a lot of sadness, because our horizon was, we lost a lot of hope from that conversation, basically. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this happened fairly early in the pregnancy, second trimester or something, like month 4 or something?
No, it was the first trimester.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
My sister, for example, is pregnant right now. Her pregnancy just sounds so much better than what we had to go through. I mean, in terms of like the a lot less angst. I mean, we were literally worried at just about every stage that we would lose the baby, And so, that early on, to think that you're going to lose your child after you get all excited was really hard. So no, we learned very early on about the complications. I remember my brother-in-law, Jammie's brother, is a physician, and he said, well, if you have this baby, it's going to be a miracle baby. That's what he told us.
There you go.
Right. So that put it in context.
Yeah. So going through that, I mean, obviously, we know the end of the story. You have a beautiful little girl now, which, as you say, is very much seems like a miracle, from the perspective of looking
seriously back. Yeah.
But as you were sort of in the middle of those weeks and those months of not being sure of, Jammie having to be on bed rest, for week after week after week, what did that do to your relationship, to your marriage? Was this, I mean, obviously this was a challenge. Did it bring you closer together, or did you discover, fractures you didn't know were there?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a difficult period for anyone, the pregnancy. And obviously there are going to be good days and bad days, but the overall trend was that we had to basically join together to get through this. I mean, it was just emotionally, physical needs on many different levels. I became like the supermarket runner. They knew me so well at our local supermarket because, if your wife is pregnant, basically often from my, experience of this, sort of what they eat, what they want to eat changes from day to day. And, there are all these cravings and things. And so it was fun in a way in that, the shopping list changed so drastically and, going to the hospital visits, the intensity of that experience definitely drew us together. we still look back at those days and are grateful that we got through. But yeah, it definitely strengthened rather than hurt the marriage. I don't know if you've heard of this term it's called anti-fragility.
Okay, no, I haven't.
It's this modern philosopher's name's Nassim Taleb. He has this term, and it basically it talks about how humans, or different entities, not just humans, but how basically disaster, we react to them in different ways. So fragility is obvious, you just kind of break like a pot. And then you can have like just the kind of the strongman approach where it's like you're just going to absorb it and get through somehow, just like through some way get through. But then there's also the anti-fragile approach where basically difficulties make you stronger, right? So they not just kind of, you don't just survive it, you actually improve, you find a way to thrive in it. And that really is what happened for the marriage, for our relationship. And I'm definitely not happy that we went through all this, and it was genuinely terrifying, but we did grow stronger, and I'm a believing person, and I think God helped us through that.
Well, yeah, that you've actually anticipated my next question, because because you are a person of faith, as you say. How did this experience, affect your faith? Did you find yourself discovering new things, or asking new questions, or being angry at God, or just holding on, through all the unknowns?
That's a great question. I was not angry. I was not angry at God. Like, I've heard that reaction from friends and from others when things get extremely tough in life, and all of us have those chapters. I haven't had that yet where I get really angry at God. Like, that hasn't been a thing, but certainly confusion and fear, and really begging God for things to be different. Like I remember after that initial experience when I talked to the doctor and he told me the 50-50 thing, we were waiting to pay, basically, in the billing area, waiting area. And I saw people laughing and smiling, and anyone that's been in Thailand know that's a huge part of the culture. They're very sort of happy, cheerful people. But that irrational part of your brain thinks, what are they? Could they possibly be happy about at this point? You know what I mean? Like, why are they? This is rude that they're even smiling. You have that reaction, and if you're kind of a praying person, you take that to God as well, and it's like this is awfully dark. Like, please get us through this, like, if there's any way, please help our baby to survive and my wife to survive this whole ordeal. It really strengthened our dependence on God, our belief that he cares about, big things and small things, and wants us to live a fulfilled and meaningful life. It's not always a happy life, but knowing that you can trust God, that I definitely grew in that belief from that experience.
Yeah, sure. So as you, I guess this was the topic of your article to a certain extent, as you look through the Bible, you're reading, about all sorts of topics and all sorts of things. Do you see the topic of family, family relationships, the identity of a family coming up through your reading of the Bible? What do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, I see it in many different ways when I read the Bible. I mean, really from even the beginning, like the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, there's this text in Genesis 2, it's verse 18, and it basically says that it's not good to be alone. It says, I think the literal, the word for word is, it's not good for the man to be alone. And obviously that's applied to women, to children, to whatever.
Yeah, we're social animals, aren't we? That's what it comes down to. We're social beings.
Exactly. We crave that connection. So whether it's the marriage connection, or it's like your connection to your dad or mom, or whatever the situation is, we need other people. We really crave that. It's not good to be alone. I don't think this is like the text, the where it says, oh, well, everyone needs to be in a romantic relationship or marriage, or anything like that. I don't take that from it, but I do think we need community as human beings, right? I mean, during this COVID-19 thing, we're seeking out community online, right? Through Zoom or whatever else it is. So I really do think that that's maybe one of the earliest indications in the Bible of the importance of family, of the importance of community, of connection. And so God kind of meant for families to be a reality in this world, and that's the way we, that's where way we survive as a human race, and we thrive off of that sense of connection. So yeah, as early as that, I definitely see family and relationship being, a really important thing in the Bible. I think of another area as well that speaks perhaps a bit more directly to the really tough experience I described in that article.
Yeah.
In Proverbs 17:17, there's this text that talks about, and it's, of course, Proverbs was written by Solomon, who most people think of as the wisest man that ever lived. And he says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. And there you see, the power of family relationships and what they're really designed for. You know what I mean? Sure, it's great to celebrate the good times, and we all love it when we have those. But man, when you're in the sort of the bleak winter phase of life, or when things are, the darkest night, in times of adversity, family can come through. And it really seems here from the text of the Bible that God wants us to be there for each other and has designed family for times like that, to get us through. And that's been my experience. Certainly the families are not perfect. I'm definitely not a perfect, son, brother, husband, father, but I do try to be there for my family in the tough times, and I appreciate that they are there for me too.
Yeah. So, something I find really interesting, Bjorn, I mean, you started with Genesis there, the story of the creation of the world, the first man and woman, Adam and Eve. And it's interesting that Genesis has God, well, first of all, Genesis says, the man and woman were naked and had no, sense of shame.
Exactly.
Which is like, whoa, like even today, it's like, okay, really, they were nudists? Okay. And then God says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. He says, here's food to eat, here's trees, every kind of tree, it's good to eat.
Right.
And then he says, here's each other, you're naked, go ahead, make babies. I don't know, sometimes we get the idea that, the Bible and I guess a Christian perspective on sexuality is very negative, that it's dirty, that it's terrible. But I don't see that in Genesis. I see this being very much of God's plan. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, honestly, I think it's a horrible distortion of the Bible to think that human sexuality is a bad thing. It's obviously an issue of survival for starters. God created Adam and Eve to kind of multiply. So, that's a positive thing right there. And then there are also really beautiful descriptions in the Bible. We were just talking about Solomon, a second ago. The Song of Solomon is another book some of us might have come across, and that talks about love and sensuality and that whole side of human relationships.
It's quite explicit, isn't it?
It probably would make some people even uncomfortable to read parts of it out loud.
I've actually heard Song of Solomon described as the Bible's sealed section.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's like the part that parents are like kind of hiding from their kids sometimes, maybe but early on. But no, it's a reality, and I don't think it's something that we're supposed to hide from. And I think this might be treading into controversial territory, but I really do think that whenever people have tried to use the Bible to justify some kind of denial of sexuality or some kind of weird shutdown of it, really bad things happen. Like really unhealthy results come out of that,
Yeah, I do see what you're saying, Bjorn, and certainly there is a conversation out there in the culture about, the dangers of repressing sexuality. We see obviously the issue that we've had with child abuse, often from celibate clergy, and there's that question of, well, you repress sexuality, it comes out in awful ways, right. and I get that, but nevertheless, I think the Bible also doesn't paint a picture of a sexual free-for-all. The Bible does paint a picture of a family structure of a man and a woman and their children. And it also, you mentioned Solomon. Solomon was the biggest polygamist of all in the Bible in terms of the number of wives and concubines he had. But he said himself it didn't actually make him that happy. He didn't deny himself any pleasure, and he says in the end it was all meaninglessness. And it's also
backfired a little bit.
Yeah, you look at all these situations with, say, I'm thinking of like the people who married, the men who married more than one wife. You think, wow, that'd be awesome. But no, that like time after time, it's misery, and there's bickering between the wives, and there's rivalry, and there's misery. And to me, it seems the Bible doesn't just say, hey, sexuality is a good thing, family is a good thing. It also says, hey, we need to set some appropriate boundaries here. We need to maintain some respect. And that also seems to be an important message that comes through the Bible.
Exactly. So, yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. So it's, the first message for me is, sexuality was created by God and is supposed to be a really good thing. But obviously, with any good thing, any gift, you can abuse it. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there are a lot of examples in the Bible of, you mentioned polygamy, and it's I'm trying to think of one situation in which it was portrayed as a good thing. You know what I mean? Like there always seems to be some kind of like jealousy or rivalry or horrible outcome, for say the kids. A lot of people know the Joseph story, Joseph born to the favorite wife kind of thing, and his brother Benjamin, and then all these other brothers are born to they're the stepbrothers that are kind of less favored, and there's this huge rivalry that ends up in a horrible situation where they basically just kind of disown their brother and sell him off as a slave. I mean, that's hardly your ideal outcome, right? And it kind of paints a picture of what can go wrong when you don't respect the boundaries that the Bible has as well. Yeah, there's this text that comes up sometimes when you talk about these issues of boundaries and how to navigate a positive relationship and kind of who to look for in a relationship. Paul talks about it, 2 Corinthians 6:14, and he talks about not being yoked together with unbelievers. And obviously, we could go deep into what that text means, but for what I would say is it really talks about the importance of making God the priority in life. And then when you seek out a romantic relationship, and when you seek, say, out a marriage partner, someone that you really want to be with, to make sure that you have some common ground there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an important thing.
Previously, I was a social worker, and I remember reading.
Oh, really? I don't know that.
Yeah, yeah. I remember reading some research on, relationships that stay together and what are the factors. And it's, often it is the case that opposites attract when it comes to personality type. So it's not about being, necessarily the same there. But what was clear is the importance of having similar values. That seems to be a really important bedrock of a good relationship. So yeah, I see what you're saying about not being unequally yoked. I guess the other thing I see in the Bible, though, Bjorn, is that yes, when people say biblical marriage this, biblical marriage that, you think, well, which biblical marriage are you talking about? The one that involved adultery or incest or murder or polygamy? Well, no. But nevertheless, there are people in those situations, and the Bible clearly depicts the harm that comes from, crossing those boundaries. But it doesn't seem to mean that God gives up on those people completely. I mean, like you say, Joseph, from this blended family, where his mum and his stepmom are sisters, and there's all this rivalry. But nevertheless, it seems like God has a plan for him, and he goes on to do incredible things. I mean, King David, goodness me, adultery, murder, and then the cover-up and all this sort of stuff. But, horrific things that he did. But nevertheless, it seemed that God, still loved him. God offered him forgiveness. Not that there weren't consequences, ongoing consequences. I think if we get the picture that if, our family structure is, maybe less than ideal, some of the decisions we've made in relationships are less than ideal, that means, God has wiped us out. That's not the picture I see in the Bible.
No, definitely not. I mean, if it were the picture, then we would all be, in trouble, wouldn't we? I mean,
yeah.
It's just, I mean, even the best of families, families that I really look up to, there's always some level of dysfunction, something you wish were better, something that went, sideways in life. And sometimes it's really serious. Sometimes it goes deeply. You know, as I was talking about the unequally yoked thing, you know, I was thinking, well, you know, what would I say to someone that already is in that situation? You know, it's and it can be difficult when you're married to someone that doesn't share your belief, or maybe you've come to that belief in the last few months or something. And
well, that's right.
It's like, how do you share that? That's a good thing about life, right? People change. So how do you get through that? And how do you have a really successful, happy relationship? So, I mean, those are, I don't necessarily have the answer other than, you know, coming back to those principles that God really does care about happy marriages, about getting us through, you know, tough times. There's this whole, you know, you were talking about how, you know, these difficult family stories in the Bible, and how there's kind of a redemptive part of it where God gets us through, like the Joseph story. You know, at the end of the story, basically he and his brothers are reunited. He and his dad are reunited. There's kind of a happy ending, even though there's been all this pain and you know, emotional and other suffering in the interim. And so I feel like the most positive message, you know, in the Bible is this, you know, that God redeems us. Romans 5:8, you know, God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So while we're still in this mess, this horrible, you know, world that we live in, you know, and the bad part of it comes out often. You know, I mean, we feel the pain, the suffering. God's there with us in that time of suffering, whatever we're going through, you know, and he wants to redeem us. You know, he wants to offer us a better life now and a far, you know, superior life to come, you know, where we can, you know, be with him and kind of enjoy that kind of connection, that kind of community, that relationship. And so, yeah, even when things are not perfect, and you know, when my 4-year-old screams and I feel like I'm a horrible parent and you know, really messed something up, there's forgiveness there. There's grace for that. There's a happier tomorrow, you know, like I don't know which text it is, but it says, weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning.
Yeah.
I often think about that. My kid is literally like screaming her head off or something, you know what I mean? Like, especially during this COVID thing where we're locked indoors all the time, you know, it's not easy on family dynamics when you're locked in all the time, you know, like basically on some kind of house arrest in some of the countries that might be listening to this. People can relate to that, but God can get us through that too. God can get us through this really difficult phase. So yeah, there is redemption. There is, even when we face difficult circumstances, and even when we create our own difficult circumstances, God is there to help us out.
Yeah, wow. No, you make a good point there, Bjorn, that, you know, families are under particular, you know, stress right now, and certainly,
seriously,
and certainly it's good to know that, you know, those of us who have faith can, you know, fall back on that and use that as a source of strength. And I think it's also great that we have in place, you know, we have extended family, we have friends, you know, we should be reaching out to them if we need to talk, or we should be checking in on them to see how they are. And look, there may come a time where, you know, we actually do need to access another, you know, community service where, you know, we can have a chat to someone for counselling. I'm thinking, you know, here in Australia, you know, Lifeline 131144 or Beyond Blue. There are certainly, you know, family violence services out there, because sadly, you know, we're seeing an uptick in family violence and conflict at this time. It's, you know, pretty sad.
It's high pressure.
It is high pressure, but there is help. There is help out there, and yeah, we certainly, you know, would like to encourage our listeners to take advantage of that if that's your situation. But thank you so much, Bjorn, for taking the time to chat to us today and being part of
thanks, Ken.
Science Radio.
Exactly. No, thank you very much for having me on. It's great to chat. It's great to connect. Yeah, this is something this topic is near and dear to my heart, and I think too, you know, a lot of us out there listening. So, yeah, the hope that God can give us is real, and it applies to even the most complicated and tough situations. So that keeps me going despite the context right now, and I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Bjorn, and thanks for your article and for your regular articles in Science. Yeah, appreciate your regular contributions.
Thanks a lot. It's a lot of fun.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Science of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.